The Mexicans do not join any faction. Neither the British nor the French are their country. They still hope, as before, to live freely in the jungle. But under artillery fire, there is no freedom. These days, they have found traces of tribes passing nearby. It was the Xiaoluan tribe tracking the British army. The Xiao planned to ambush the British troops, but among them were the Mexicans' friends, the Mohawk. The Metistas cicada, unaware of royal command. The Xiao followed the Mexicans and the British army, and the Mexicans trailed behind the Xiao. Sure enough, deep in the forest, the Xiao launched an attack on the British troops. Xiao insiders already planted within the army wielded battle axes, striking fiercely. Then, the Xiao warriors in the jungle raised their long spears, aiming at the British troops. The British were completely unfamiliar with the terrain, and quickly broke ranks. The Xiao were like fierce beasts, intent on wiping out their opponents in one net. They carried axes in one hand, guns in the other, with blades at their waist. Every time they saw a British soldier, they would seize the moment to cut off a piece of the soldier's scalp. This was not only a trophy of conquest, but also proof of their merit to claim rewards from the French army. A young officer of the Thunder Squad soon fell from his horse, seeing two girls behind about to die under the Xiao axes. At this crucial moment, the Mexicans acted. They moved swiftly and deftly. The Xiao were soon driven away. The insider, who tried to shoot the girls, seeing the situation worsen, fired a shot to cover his retreat, and then disappeared into the forest. The young commander was saved, but most of the army was dead or wounded. The wounded had to turn back to the old camp. The remaining group continued toward the army's destination. The proposal came from a Mexican named Nadi. The other two Mexicans were his foster father Jincaga and brother Enka. To hide their trail, Enka sent the horses away, so they had to travel on foot all the way. From their conversation, Nadi learned the young commander was named Duncan. He was delivering orders to report to Fort Henry in Nunline, where General Munro was stationed, engaged in battle against the French army. The two girls behind, Kona and Alice, were Munro's daughters. They had come to visit their father, but unexpectedly, the battle intensified and both nearly lost their lives. Passing through the borderlands of the British Sioux colonial area, they found a farm destroyed, where women and children had been cruelly killed in their homes. The village men had already gone to the battlefield, joining the British Army's ranks. The noblewoman Kona wanted to honor Christian spirit by burying the family, but was stopped by Nadi. Later, Kona learned that family were Nadi's friends, leaving the bodies undisturbed to avoid alerting the enemy about their own whereabouts. Nadi was not heartless, but had no choice, like the Indians who almost had no choice, forced to live in borderlands. Only then could they be left alone and avoid deaths. Yet in the end, they still could not escape this disaster. In Nadi's eyes, Kona showed sadness, very different from the ruthless killer she was earlier, like night and day. Actually, Nadi was not Mexican. He was British. At 2 years old, his family was killed by French gunfire, and he was raised by foster father Jincaga. But he said his soul belonged to the Indians, who respected nature and life. The night was cool as water. Their conversation that night eliminated their prejudices and kindled a subtle, indescribable feeling between them. After nearly 2 days on foot, they finally arrived in Weibo, where on the opposite bank, cannon fire still raged and the British forces were weak. The wounded are being taken down from the battlements one by one. Inside the city, laments filled the air as Nadi and his party traveled by water. They escorted the Kana sisters as they quietly crossed to the opposite bank. Yet General Munro, upon seeing his daughters, was burning with anger. It turned out that the messenger for the general was none other than Egu, the insider planted within the army. Nadi, who was well acquainted with all the Indian tribes, also confirmed that Egu was actually a member of the Xiao tribe. The British had long been held at the mercy of the French, leaving them no choice but to rely on writing another plea for help, even though no reinforcements had arrived. The MO soldiers in the British army began to consider leaving. Their homes were suffering under the French assault. They had to return to save their families. However, General Munro and Duncan refused to let anyone leave. They claimed that national interests outweighed family survival. Yet, whose country is it really and whose home? To stabilize troop morale, Duncan, on one hand, concealed the fact that the MO patriarch had been slaughtered by the French, while on the other, the general decreed death for any deserters. All of this did not escape Kana's notice. Kana had long been betrothed to Duncan, but he was of no use to Duncan. He wanted his father to call off the marriage, but at that moment, Duncan's actions left him deeply disappointed. Meanwhile, knowing the truth, Nadi secretly aided these soldiers in escaping. And then he turned back. He didn't want to run away with everyone else, because Kana was still there, Throughout the escape, he discovered that he had fallen in love with Kana. He didn't want to hide his feelings, just as he had never hidden his prejudice against white women from the start. Kana was overjoyed upon hearing this confession. How could he not also have fallen for the wisdom and tenderness hidden beneath Nadi's tough exterior? There was no moonlight that night. Only the faint sounds of cannon fire and the flickering of bonfires filled the darkness. Music was playing downstairs. Soldiers, finding solace amid their hardship, started to dance. In a sudden change of light, the two upstairs finally bared their hearts, embracing each other tightly. Yet that very night, Nadi was captured, accused of inciting soldiers to desert and undermining troop morale. Technically, he should have been hanged. Yet Kana went to plead with his father. But his father remained unmoved. Even Duncan refused to lend a hand. Duncan watched his beloved woman fall into another's arms, and his heart felt unbearably heavy, though he could only suppress the pain. With no way to call for help, she resolved to live or die together with the man she adored. Casualties in the city were severe, and smallpox broke out among the soldiers. Meanwhile, outside, the French forces steadily closed in, reaching the city gates. The city's troops never received any reinforcements. French General Mack came to urge their surrender. He hoped that the British would abandon the siege of the fortress, so that he wouldn't have to take even an iota from them. He promised to provide them with medical personnel and permit their return home. Munro still wanted to continue the struggle, but Mack produced a letter, a reply from another British unit that had refused to send reinforcements. The letter also advised Munro and his men to surrender, as the situation was hopeless. To preserve the lives of the remaining soldiers, Munro had no choice but to give up the fortress, but what he didn't realize was that the Shio tribe, allies of the French, could not simply allow the British to escape. Just as the French had massacred the Mo people, the British had previously committed atrocities against the Shio. The Shio warriors, led by Egu, not only sought a share of the spoils upon victory, but also desired to personally slay the British soldiers, to avenge past injustices. General Mack tacitly approved. After all, he had fulfilled the deal that allowed the British to leave. For the rest, why not sit back and watch the Tigers fight? This would inevitably be another brutal battle. Only this time, the Shio forces were much more formidable, as several Shio fighters burst out of the woods, cut down several soldiers. Then they hid in the dense forest, howling softly, causing the soldiers and civilians to become extremely tense. Soon more members of the Shio tribe poured out. The formation instantly became chaotic with continuous gunfire. The smoke was thick and blood flowed everywhere. The warriors of the Shio tribe hacked swiftly. Battle axes struck the British soldiers' lower abdomen and heads. After soldiers fell, they did not forget to scalp them as trophies. The leader Egu quickly struck General Munro. His entire family was slaughtered by British guns and artillery. Now he was determined to wipe out Munro's descendants. Meanwhile, Nadi, captured by the British, quickly broke free from the shackles. He and his foster fathers Kankaga and brother Enka lifted their spears and fought fiercely against the enemy. But outnumbered, the British soon lost the battle. Nadi and company led the Kinna sisters to the riverbank. They found several canoes. However, the Shio tribe followers were close behind. They had no choice but to abandon the canoes and hide in a cave. They hoped to create a death illusion, to make the Shio tribe abandon their pursuit. But the enemies saw through it, seeing the outside firelight grow closer. The gunpowder on Nadi and the others had been soaked by water. They lost their most powerful weapon, bare hands. Unable to resist the enemy and to conserve strength, Nadi had to leave first with Kankaga and Enka to find gunpowder and come back to save the Kinna sisters. Nadi was right. Egu and his group didn't kill those British on the spot. According to tribal custom, they had to bring the British back to burn them alive, sharing the glory with everyone. After finding gunpowder, Nadi and the others then followed to the Shio tribe's land. By then, fires had been lit within the tribe. They were about to burn the British alive. Nadi arrived just in time, holding the honor belt of the Mexican tribe, requesting to reduce conflict and to release the captured British, but Egu disagreed. He wants to treat others as they treat him. At that moment, the white-haired old chief spoke. He foresaw this day long ago. The arrival of whites would bring disaster to the Indian tribes. With misfortune approaching, he didn't know where the Shio tribe would head. He only wished to minimize the bloody killing. He ordered the release of Sister Alice and Duncan to show the British a desire for peace. But Kinna was to die. Otherwise, it would be hard to appease the tribe's hatred. Things had come to this. Nadi decided to exchange his own life for Kinna's. But he couldn't speak the Shio language, nor the French understood by the Shio people. So he asked Duncan to translate for him. Duncan translated all of Nadi's words, but replaced Nadi's name with his own. He wanted to trade his life for the girl he loved, and his eternal remembrance of her. Seeing Duncan covered in paint behind him, being carried on a frame to be burned, Kinna couldn't help but cry. In this life, he ultimately owed her, and Nadi pulled the trigger, ending Duncan's suffering. Meanwhile, Alice was taken away by Egu. They were heading west of Lake Shulun. Enka, seeing Alice taken away, was anxious. Like Naughty, she too had fallen in love with General Munro's daughter, but she was not good with words. She could only choose to silently protect Alice. She feared Alice would be harmed. Unable to wait for Father and Naughty, she tracked alone, wanting to rescue Alice quickly. But outmatched, Ega's knife quickly stabbed her abdomen. She was thrown off a cliff by Egu, usually quiet Alice. Witnessed Enka's death for her with her own eyes. The sorrow in her heart gradually turned into resolute courage. He looked back at the fallen Enka. Then he leaped after Enka. They lie forever on the same huge stone, never to witness again the chaos and sorrow on this land. By the time the Naughty and Jinka clans arrived, only the empty valley echoed, pain turning into hatred. The anger was directed at the Shuzu people. The Jinka clan killed Egu in the same way, avenging their son, but sadly life cannot be restored. Iron hooves crushed all grass to nothing. When civilization tramples into the jungle, rivers run red with blood. But success and failure turn to nothing in the end. Only this blood-red sunset and the green mountains remain.